Okay, welcome everyone. I am Stacy Hurst. I will be moderating this session. I have the privilege of moderating Jillian and Yvette. As I mentioned, my name is Stacy Hurst. I am an assistant professor of teacher education at Southern Utah University, and I'm also the chief academic advisor at Reading Horizons. And we are so lucky today to be able to hear from Jillian Castor and Yvette Mans. Jillian has been teaching for over 10 years in the classroom. She taught in Chicago and Minneapolis, and you're going to hear more from her today about her journey to the science of reading. But she has also been with Reading Horizons since 2017. Our other presenter today is Yvette Mans, and she is based in Atlanta. She's been there for 13 years, working in the space of education in all kinds of settings, public, charter, and private schools all across the city. We'll hear some more from Yvette as well, but we are happy to have both of you with us today. And we are going to be talking about reading science, of course. So, Jillian, would you mind by starting out sharing with us what your journey to the science of reading has been?
Yes. First, I just want to say thank you, everybody, for being here. And like Stacey said, I was an educator for 10 years, taught kindergarten, and was very thankful that I had an explicit phonics program pretty much right out the gate. I used Wilson for a lot of my career in kindergarten. But it wasn't until I started working for Reading Horizons where I really learned about the why and the how and how the brain learns to read. One of my first assignments was to read the book Overcoming Dyslexia by Sally Shaywitz. And it felt like somebody had written a book about my secret life. And it was then when I realized, oh my gosh, I think I'm dyslexic, and had gone through the assessments and whatnot. And lo and behold, that is where I was. And I've just been so passionate about it because I just know the impact that it's made for me and what we can do for our students. So yeah, that's kind of a little bit about me. Yvette, do you want to share your journey?
Sure. So I started out teaching third grade here in Atlanta, Georgia. It was great, but sometimes, honestly, full transparency, I have to check back on those students like, hey, are y'all all right? Because I did not have access to the science of reading. I was doing what I was told to do, and it didn't work for everyone. And so I went on a quest in my educational journey to try to find out like what really works, what will make reading stick. And there were a lot of students over the years who weren't reading, and there was an assumption that they couldn't read. But there were also students who didn't really want to read because of interest and all the other factors that tie into actually making meaning and finding joy out of reading. So, long story short, we opened a charter school here. Then I taught fifth grade, and then I worked at a literacy research center. And we were part of the International Dyslexia Association, and I learned so much information. Became a certified dyslexia practitioner and worked in a clinic with students and adults who experience dyslexia. And then I decided to come to Reading Horizons because that was where I saw theory come into practice. I always ask myself, what does this look like in my classroom? Like, there's a lot of information out there, but how does that look when I'm in front of my students? So this gave me my answer, and I've been here since last year. Like it feels like forever. I feel like I'm home, but that's my path.
I love it. Well, it sounds like we all have things in common. I have shared my story before, but I graduated with my bachelor's degree, and I also had an endorsement, a reading endorsement, when I graduated with my bachelor's degree. So I assumed that I was prepared to teach first grade and teach reading. It was very early in my first year of teaching. I'll say the month of October, because that's when it was, when I realized, I think I'm missing something in my instruction. I'm not sure what it is, but I count it one of my just so fortunate that I actually started teaching right around the time that the National Reading Panel published their meta-analysis. So I was lucky enough to know about that. I read the entire report, and I learned a lot about what was missing in my instruction, including that I hadn't quite been prepared in my pre-service education to teach reading like I thought I had. So, to your question, Yvette, which I think all of us ask at some point, so how do we take this research and apply it in my classroom? And I really did my best. That is actually how I found Reading Horizons, because that phonics piece, I don't need to tell you, is complex. And I was so grateful that there was a resource that I was lucky enough to find that I could apply in my own classroom. I became a literacy coach after that, and I helped a lot of teachers, or tried to help them apply those things that we're learning through science as well. And then I had the opportunity unexpectedly in my career path to join the Reading Horizons team, where I have spent a lot of years writing curriculum and training on the method. And then this is my third year that I also get to teach pre-service teachers and help them become more prepared to teach reading. So that is my path. And we are really excited to hear today um, from you, Jillian and Yvette. And could you talk to us about what we're going to hear about today, what we're going to learn?
Sure, sure. So here are our goals for today. We want to learn about high value resources. So we talked about taking theory and putting it into practice, but how can we fill our own backpacks and our own knowledge base? So looking at high value resources that give us the guidance and practical tips and insight, but then also knowing what to look for. So we have our look fors, and then we also want to know what to look out for. So we have those two elements that we're going to vet some resources through. And then we want to make sure that we have the confidence as educators. We always know what's best for our students. And if we don't always have the answer, that's fine. But we want to implement and lean on our community of experts and peers and educators to make sure that we're doing the best that we can. But I'm sure everyone that's here is already doing the best they can. A lot of people are already on Thanksgiving break and they still chose to be here. So we thank you for that and what you're doing. And we want to make sure that you go forth and you make instructional decisions just really confidently. So that's our goal. And if we've met that, then we're all good.
Thank you, Yvette. I just love, being here with the community, because we know that, just like you're saying, that we really learn from each other, and that's the best way to learn. So when we think about the science of reading, it's good just to have that common language and understanding. So when you hear us saying it, we're talking about that science of reading that includes, or really the methods and approaches that have been found through research to give kids a learning advantage in reading. So all of those studies working together and applying that in our classrooms and in our teaching. Let me scoot ahead. We're going to do a poll, Yvette.
hmm So before we jump into the meat of things, I wanted to find out, how comfortable are you with finding credible resources aligned to the science of reading? So I know science of reading is like a buzz term. It's everywhere. It's plastered. It's on billboards in my mind in the middle of the streets. It's everywhere. But how do you feel about finding really credible resources where you can look at it and say, okay, this fits under the umbrella of the science of reading? I see some responses coming in. Some people are saying, send help. And that's what we're here for. We're here to have a conversation and dialogue. A lot of us are just getting our feet wet. And hey, even if you got to dip your big toe into the pool, you're going to get in. You're in the right place. Most people are somewhat comfortable, and then some people are also comfortable too. So as we go through this session, again, we're going to look for our watch out fors and look for and all those things. But I love the disbursement of the data, because we know all of our experiences are different in education and all of our levels are different. And hopefully by the end of this session, you'll have the information so that you can vet resources to use in your classroom.
It's a really important question to ask, and I'm glad you did, because especially with the term that's so common, right?
Mhm.
So this is an important topic.
Exactly. That's what Jillian was talking about with the common language. And so as we go through, we're going to revisit that and just see how we can change our comfort levels and find really good, credible resources. So, Jillian, can you tell us some best practices as we start to explore resources?
Yes. This is a free infographic, I guess you could call this, from Rise, Arkansas. And I found this on the International Dyslexia Association for the Arkansas chapter. But I think I wanted to start with this because I think so often in when we're talking about the science of reading, we just think that it stops at phonics or that it's only those bottom strands of Scarborough's reading rope. But really, it's covering all aspects. And we know from the National Reading Panel that we have the big five here. So we have phonological awareness, phonics, fluency, and vocabulary. And we're going to share these slides with you so you'll get the links. But I just really appreciate these very specific things that we want to be looking for. They break down the phonological awareness skills into, first you want to include blending and segmenting, but then don't forget about those more advanced skills with substituting phonemes and reversing. So, love this. And I did say the big five, so you will notice comprehension down here because we know that comprehension is a byproduct of having phonological awareness, phonics, fluency, and vocabulary built, to mastery. Without that, our students just don't have the cognitive bandwidth to comprehend what they're reading. So, I love this graphic. And then down here, another just big look for is that it's systematic and sequential when we are instructing our students, that we're being really intentional. So that is just one resource about what it is. And I think it's good too to talk about and understand like what it's not. So we know it's not just phonics. We know that one thing that I realized when I was talking about, as a kindergarten teacher, I had this explicit phonics in place, but then when it came time for the students to read, I was having them, use the cueing system and guessing. So it's really about looking at it from a structural lens and how our instruction all across the day can align to these approaches.
I love how you
Let,
said all across the day. It reminds me of something I saw some teachers here doing. They were lining up to go to the restroom and they were playing phonemic awareness games. And it wasn't like it was just isolated in their literacy block, but it was really embedded. And I think about at the beginning of my teaching career, I would say, how come my students aren't comprehending? And I didn't realize how all those components work together to get to that goal of making meaning and comprehending. So if I could go back, I would make sure to stick with those big five, as you mentioned. And big five is just one term we use in the science of reading. And I like to call this the alphabet soup. When we're sitting around, us educators, we speak a common language. We say RTI and MTSS and SOR. And so, in this alphabet soup, this metaphorical soup, there's a lot of terms that are really specific to us. And again, when I graduated from my undergraduate experience, I didn't know the difference between phonics and phonological awareness and phonemic awareness. I just know they all begin with PHON. What's the difference between those things? So it's so important for us to make sure we have a common language. So in that alphabet soup that you kind of see on the side, it looks more like cereal, but you get the image. So on the Science of Reading Collective, we have a database of literacy lexicon. So how can we put this into plain language so everyone has a common understanding? Another great resource, I love this site, Reading Rockets. Drop in the chat if you've ever visited Reading Rockets. They have some really good resources, but they also have a comprehensive library or dictionary of terms. So you have the collective as a resource, and you also have Reading Rockets. So I see a lot of yeses, love reading rockets, ditto, same. And it's really important that we understand that because I don't know, maybe I was asleep that day in class or something and missed the difference. But as we go and grow through our practice now, we want to make sure we have that understanding. And Teresa said it is a great resource for parents and families too. I agree. We totally understand that it takes a village to raise our children. So cool tip, Teresa, for sharing that out. And Amy says she's been to Reading Rockets as well, and so has Tawana. So wonderful.
Yeah, they do have a great, it's called Reading 101. They have a course,
Mhm.
that's a Science of Reading basic course, so it's a really good resource.
Good. So this is one of the good look fors when you have terminology and plain talk that's very clear to help us to understand the alphabet soup or the ABCs of SOR.
Uh, it reminds me of the Reading League. They have a journal that I subscribe to, and there was one article about sight words at AK, well, not AK, but the difference between sight words and high frequency words, and I can't even remember, but just how people are using them interchangeably. And it just really made everything clear about, when we are referring to a sight word could be any type of word. It's one that you have orthographically mapped, and now just you see it and you can read it by sight. So I can just see how important that information is. So thank you, Yvette. um I'm going to scoot on here. So I want to know too in the chat how many of you are either, maybe this is your first year doing a sound wall or you're transitioning into a sound wall. Tell me in the chat. I know it's quite a buzz right now. I see Amy is using one. So there are really good resources all over the internet with free site wall or site wall sound wall materials. So here's just some quick look fors and why we are looking at sound walls versus word walls. So sound walls are organized by speech, unlike a word wall that's organized by letters. They move from speech or sound to print, whereas a word wall uses that whole language approach. An example of this was a student I had who was trying to write the word the, didn't know how to spell it. And I remember pointing to, back in the day, the word wall and saying, okay, just go look for it. Like, that's one of our sight words. And so student went to go look for it. Well, they don't know how to spell it. So the word wall really only works if the student can already read the word, right? It's just to kind of confirm the spelling. Whereas now I know, and I use, I use this portable sound wall with my students that I tutor. When they don't know how to spell a word, we listen for that sound, and then we would go and find it on the board and then confirm that spelling. Oh, yes, it's TH that makes the sound. So it's super helpful because it helps students become independent with both the encoding, so the writing, and the decoding. Whereas a word wall, students can become dependent on the word wall for correct spelling, and really they need to know what the word says for it to even be useful. So that's just a little thing to look out for, sound walls versus word walls. But I do want to show you with these free resources what you can look for even more. So when searching out free materials or materials for cost, you want to make sure that they include the articulatory gestures and the keywords. So when my student is working on the word the, they're paying attention to how their mouth is formed. The, they can come up to the board and see, oh, look at these match. Is it like in feather, or is it like in three. Oh, that doesn't make sense. The three. This one is voice. This one is voiceless. Stacy, I've heard you say in your podcast, you explained it so beautifully about why these articulatory gestures are so important. Can you give us, we want to hear it from you too. Why do you think that that's so important, or what does the science of reading say?
Yeah, I wish that I discovered that, why it's so important, but I didn't. I just read it. So, but I did read it from, a lot of researchers, Stanislaus Dehaene, Louisa Moats mentions this in her book, Speech to Print, and it really is something that I hadn't expected. When we hear about those individual phonemes, we think that it's the sound, that matters. It's actually the articulatory gestures, is the way our brain recognizes those sounds, not necessarily by how we hear them, right? It's how we form them. So we also learn from the science that anything we want to get to the point of automaticity, we have to start out slow first. So by focusing on those phonemes, becoming aware of how we produce them, and how they sound, of course, then that helps set our students up for success in recognizing them rapidly so they can become fluent readers. And I did notice we had a question in the chat about when we would start using a resource like a sound wall. And my sister teaches preschool. She uses it in her preschool classroom. You'll see them a lot in kindergarten and first grade, and I would use them into second. And Jillian mentioned it too. We call it a sound spelling wall because eventually we want to transfer to print as well. So that is
Love,
my answer. And if you want more information, Louisa Moats is a great resource, and Stanislaus Dane.
love it. Thank you, Stacy. Another thing just to keep in mind too, and this ties into what we're talking about with that articulation, is making sure that it's organized by manner of articulation and mouth placement. And this has been so helpful. Again, going back to that common language, so that students can talk and explain what's happening in their mouth when they are articulating the sounds. But I've noticed too how helpful it is for me when I'm using, let's say I'm using my portable sound wall and they're trying to write, like just on last Sunday, I had a student working on when S makes the Z sound. So I think the word was rose, and they wrote ZE. So then we came to our portable sound wall and confirmed, okay, let's look at for that Z sound. Now let's see what spellings are for that sound. And it was easy to do because we had already talked about where in the mouth our tongue was placed and what type of sound it was. So we could just, follow it very quickly. I'd say another good look for too is that your sound wall instruction is aligning to your phonics instruction, right? So that you are introducing the phonemes and then tying it to the grapheme, and then that's following the same scope and sequence and carrying it out throughout the day.
I love that, Jillian. Could you go back for one sec?
Of course.
So I was thinking of the example that you just mentioned, and I love how students can pinpoint and use the portable sound wall as a reference. So Jeanette just dropped the link where you can download this in our community, and I love how student friendly the terms are. When I first found out about articulation in general, I learned about the letters or the phonemes for B and P, and the language is like, "Oh, yeah, they're bilabial plosives." And I'm like, "How do I explain that?" Bi means two, labial means lips, so two lips pop together, but this is just really friendly for students. Instead of memorizing the terminology, it's great for us to know. However, if they can have a tool that they can reference that's portable for them, they can take it out their literacy folder and look at it, then that's a game changer. So thanks for sharing this one. It's one of my faves.
Of course. And I see in the chat a lot of people asking if they can access this. And there is, we're sharing the link in the chat, but we did just launched our free community called the Science of Reading Collective. So on here, there's a section all about sound walls. There's a podcast with Stacy and her team who who host the podcast. And then what I love is you did 2 ed webs, and I love ed webinars because they're not product focused. They're learning based focus. So it's not just about the Reading Horizon sound wall, but sound walls in general. And I will say both times I just learned so much from you. So if you are interested, please join the community. And then here's where you can download these 2 free resources. So those are the portable sound walls. And real quick tip, I learned this from another community that I am in on Facebook where they are using these, is that I think it was Lindsay who recommended laminating these and then taking a permanent marker and covering the graphemes that you haven't taught yet so you don't overwhelm the student. And then when you're giving that explicit instruction on the sound and the grapheme, then you use your dry erase marker to reveal the letter. And I just thought that was brilliant. So I had to share that as well. Okay, I'm going to show you some more free sound wall resources. So if you are making that transition from word walls to sound walls, if you are one of those send help or I'm just getting my feet wet, there is an awesome blog on Reading Rockets, our favorite, besides our own blog, obviously, that just really helps you navigate that. And I also wanted to share with you the Louisiana Board of Education. They have created a sound wall, and let me share my screen so you can see it. It is right here on their website. And like I said, we're going to share the slides so you'll get all the links here. But they have their own sound wall, and then it has their phoning cards, and they even include pictures of students. So something else to check out, as well as all the resources on the Science of Reading Collective. And then you probably saw before I started sharing my screen, there was a little picture of Yvette, and we have a celebrity on our hands. The Science of Reading celebrity here. We actually have 2. But Yvette, can you kind of tell us a little bit about this project you did with Cox Campus?
Sure. And it's right on time. I see Alma asked in the chat resources for middle school. So a couple years ago, I was at Cox Campus, and they're a great resource as well for science of reading and just best practices in literacy. And so we decided to do a video talking about how to pronounce the phonemes. A lot of people know there's 26 letters in the English alphabet, but not that they work together to make these 44 sounds. And so it was lots of fun. There was a production crew called Brownie Land. Robin is amazing. She lives here in Atlanta too. And we filmed this video, and there was like a speech language pathologist on set, and we did this so many times to make sure it was right, because I mentioned earlier I'm from New York City. And so my natural way of speaking did not match. I guess I would have had my own sound wall with the way that I talked. So it was an area of growth for me. I still honor, my home language, as we should do with our students. But this one was just to be an example. And so this has been working with elementary students, middle, high. And if you go on YouTube, it's called 44 Phonemes, and you'll see in the chat, there are people around the world who are learning how to speak English from understanding the sounds, because some sounds in English don't exist in their language, in their native language. Or I've noticed a lot other languages have more guttural sounds than we do. So it's just been a helpful tool. And so it's the same way we had to practice. I think it's helpful to just make sure that your students have a good example. So when they go to blend the sounds to create words, they're not adding in a schwa, and they're able to match that actual sound to the print that they're reading. So this is an example of a resource. Full transparency. I still struggle with the letter R. I keep I don't know. I don't know. But it's the closest I could do. But I hope this is a helpful tool as well. And make sure to visit Cox Campus. They're great. They're another free resource. And thank you, Doris, for dropping the video in the chat too. Alma says she's used this off of YouTube also. And thank you. So yeah,
Yeah.
this is a great resource. I'm
Yvette,
gonna
I
check
don't
this
know
out.
if you know this, but I actually assigned my students to watch your video. That's before I
Oh,
even knew you.
oh, wow.
And I will also say that I scanned the interwebs because I want to find one that has proper pronunciation, right? And
Mhm.
yours was the one. So even though you think the sound is tricky, which it is because we don't pronounce it in isolation ever, you
Right.
did great.
Thank
Good
you.
job.
I
Thank
needed
you.
that reassurance. Thank you. It's
It
those
is a
liquid
great
sounds.
resource.
They always get you. But it's another resource as well, too. So thank you for sharing that.
Do you mind if I just play just a quick second of it?
Sure, sure.
All right.
Consonant phoneme. Knitted letter or letter combination, also known as a grapheme, on the screen as I say the sound. Ready? Here we go. As in banana. As in dinosaur.
All right, I'll stop there, but please check it out. It's such a good resource.
Thank you. And you never get comfortable having a camera that close to your
I
mouth.
know.
But that goes back to what you were saying, Stacy, about the articulatory gestures, and Jillian, how you talked about the importance of that. I think it was important to zoom on that. And if you want, there are examples. It goes in order of the consonant sounds, and then vowels, and then R control vowels, vowel teams. But they're all in there as well. Thank you, Tawana. It was really close. Um, so as we go away from sound walls and phonemes, what happens when we get to actually mapping these phonemes to graphemes? So high frequency words, gone are the days of the flashcards and memorization. So a good look for is to make sure that phoneme and grapheme mapping are occurring. So, if you say a word and use it in a context sentence, and then focus on the phonemes in the word, then determine which letters represent the sounds in the words. I recently read something that said letters don't make sounds. It's the letters actually represent what
Mm-hmm.
sounds are. Yeah, I was like, oh, that was like the emoji with the mind blown thing. Like, yeah, letters are just the written representation of the sounds that they work together to make. But then also, still, we want the students to be able to read and spell the word in isolation and in context. So here's an example with the word in. So instead of showing a flashcard, like say, oh, this is in, and then say the word back, we actually want to map the phonemes to the graphemes. And then, bonus, give an example of it used in context to build um, background information. So,
I
some really, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say I love that, and um that just a look for is that we want to be doing that with all of our words, even if they're not regular, like the word of, where we could do, if you haven't Googled, like the heart word method, or we still want to map those sounds to the letters, even if it's not following a regular pattern. So I love it.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
that's a common question. What if a word like of, or a word like was, like, do we
Mm-hmm.
still map those? And yes, we do. So here are some more resources. We have some Elkonin boxes, and that really helps with decoding and encoding, and then creating a blending board. So instead of using a blending board that has the wooden piece and the cards here, this teacher, actually, this is Farmer Loves Phonics on Instagram, and she has post-its, and so that's an example of how she uses orthographic mapping there. And then also dropping knowledge with Heidi. It's okay for me to drop the g sound because it's dropping knowledge with Heidi and all things science of reading. She has a really, really good TikTok video. Um, and I'm new to TikTok. I'm a geriatric millennial, as they call us. So I haven't really posted on there, but as I look through things, I see really good things that are happening. And that just goes to lift up what's happening in the educator community and why a collective is important. So, Jillian, do you have no, Diane, do you have that video of dropping knowledge with Heidi, the video where she's showing how we do the actual
So
orthographic
rainbow
mapping?
writing words isn't effective because our brains don't store words based on visual memory. A better way to do this activity would be to rainbow write sounds. So the child just uses a different color for each sound in the word. And this works with all words, not just high frequency words.
Love that. Stacy, what do you think about that?
I love that. And as somebody who made the egregious mistake of doing rainbow writing before, I love this. And I recently heard I had the opportunity to hear Louisa Moats speak, and she got really animated about a specific point that you brought up, Yvette, and that is that letters don't make sounds. And so I think one really important thing, and I really drill this into my students, and it's not so much about the exact wording, it's that we understand that, right? So instead of saying, what sound does this letter make? We say, what sound does this letter spell? Or when you think of this sound, what letter do you think of? What spells it? So that I love rethinking that rainbow writing, focusing on the phonemes. And that also aligns with that heart word approach that Jillian mentioned as well. Yeah, great resource.
I love it.
Absolutely.
It also just reminds me of you know, I think it's Louisa Moats that programs don't teach, teachers teach, and just like how these great resources and these great educators making this viral content like really have empowered so many educators to dive in more to the science of reading.
Yeah, and that's a sign that goes to show how committed we are because when we're
Yeah.
off work, when we're out of the schoolhouse or we're away from our classroom, in our leisure on social media, we're still looking up tips and tricks. Like that's pretty cool.
And
I
people are
love that.
taking the time to make TikToks, which at
Mhm.
the longest in a vet, this is for your information in case you don't know yet, can only be 3 minutes unless you're doing a live. But how long
Oh,
it takes to do those 3, I mean, people are doing this in their spare time because we all care so much. I love it.
wow.
The
Okay, so
collective is a
Stacey,
great
you know a
idea.
little more than I thought you knew. I'm gonna need
Well, I'm just
a
an observer.
TikTok.
I've not dared make one yet. So,
Watching in the shadows.
yes, I'm a lurker.
Yes. Okay, so Rachel says that
Uh,
there are a lot fewer heart parts than we initially think. And so she's so right. She said that in the chat. So most words are readily decodable. You're absolutely correct. So I think that's a good strategy to implement when you're mapping. Thank you for that. And then also, as we're mapping, again, we want to move away from memorization. So just these are some examples for what to look out or watch out for. And
yeah,
you know,
and
think
then,
education is not black or white. It's not like this whole either or thinking. You know, we understand that there's some gray areas, but we want to make sure we're implementing best practices here. And so if we can implement orthographic mapping and instead of having our students memorize all 250 patterns in the English language, then we can empower them to decode and engage with the text with words they're unfamiliar with because they have the strategies for how to engage with that text. So, Stacy, I interrupted you. Sorry. What
no,
were you
you are
saying?
great. Everything you're saying is important, and you're right. When we, create those phoneme grapheme correspondences for our students initially, then their brain will be able to do that on their own, and we do call that orthographic mapping, right? As teachers, we can facilitate that process that happens in the brain. And again, even little things like the verbiage we use, like saying, what sound does this letter spell? Or when you hear this sound, what letter do you think of? Those things all help facilitate those skills that we need to have fluent reading.
Yes, thank you for that. And so once we are mapping our words and students are decoding and encoding, then let's look at our scope and sequence. Jillian, what do you think are some good look fors that as we go through phonics instruction?
Yes. Decodable books are, those are the, I don't even know. I'm trying to think of like trying to think of the podcast title that we use, but
I think it was
they,
training wheels.
training wheels, that's the word I was looking for. Yes, they are the training wheels. In that it takes those skills that they're learning in phonics and putting them into context. And so you just can never have enough. If you're like me, you're downloading every free one you see and just building your library. I've seen a lot of schools completely redo their communal libraries, not for this, student libraries, but for the teacher resource library with decodables. So I just wanted to share some look fors. And the biggest one is to make sure that it aligns to your scope and sequence. So the Measured Mom, she has so many amazing free decodables. And again, we'll share the link, but it's amazing that she's, sharing this resource. And what I love about them is that on the left, she has that scope and sequence, and then also shows you the high frequency words. So when you're using these or any decodable book, you want to take that scope and sequence and align it to what you're using. Because just because it has decodable on it doesn't mean that it's going to be decodable for your students, right? So double check the scope and sequence, and make sure it has one in there. So this actually happened to me a couple of days ago that I was looking at this resource. It's a great book, but I was teaching my students in the Reading Horizon scope and sequence. We were on double S, F, and Z, which this covers, but it also included compound words. And I swear, every time I think like, oh, I could just skip ahead and teach them compound words real quick, and then go come back. It's like, no, just stick to the sequence. And they need that. They need to, they're on their training wheels. And so they really need that. And just put it to the side. And then when I get to compound words or whatever the furthest skill is, then I can use that text. So just something to keep in mind when you are looking at decodables. Another thing to look for is that it's comprehensible text. And so you see this a lot. This is a big topic on Facebook groups, like the science of reading, what I should have learned in college is, here's these decodable books, but do they make any sense? Sometimes no, because if it has to be so controlled, it can be tricky for the writers to make it, sound coherent. So I really do love the Reading Horizons decodable books because they are comprehensible. We are sharing several of them on the Science of Reading Collective website, so they're for free. You can download the PDF. What I also like about it is it shows you the skill in focus. So this one would be voiced and voiceless TH. They are Lexile measured, so that's through a partnership with Metametrics. And then they are comprehensible, and they have comprehension questions already built in. And you can differentiate those by just having your students use the ABC multiple choice, or turn them into a writing prompt and get your writing in response to reading going. So those are available on the collective as well.
So, Jillian, you mentioned that a couple of them are available, but knowing you, I'm sure you have something up your sleeve when it comes to these decodable books and these little books. Do you have anything
I
for us?
All right, here it is. So we are very excited to be launching the community. So in celebration, we are giving away 6 free, sorry, let me reverse that. Well, no, 6 sets of decodable readers already printed and binded and professionally put together. I can't even think of how you would say it, but they're like legit. And we're giving away 6 sets to 5 teachers. So if you are the
Ooh.
winner, you're going to get 6 copies of each book. And I believe there's a little over 50 titles, so that you can use them in small group instruction.
Wow.
We, yeah,
Yeah,
well,
You're being
that is
generous.
gold.
I feel like
Wow.
I feel like I'm like on an infomercial right now, but it's very exciting. And we do
Oh,
want to give
somebody asked,
people,
how do they
oh,
win?
how do they win? Good question. So we want to give people a chance to watch the webinar too. So we're going to wait to give everybody a chance to watch, and then we will pick the winner based off of your attendance. So if you watch live or the recording, you are going to be in the raffle. It will just be picked at random. And
And
we will
so,
email you, we will
okay.
email everybody to let them know who the winners are and that they have been picked. So if you are here, you are already in the drawing.
Okay. And
That
so
was
let's
easy.
say,
That's cool.
yeah, let's say like maybe one teacher is here and then their teacher bestie is here and then they both enter, then they could use it in small groups because there's 6 of each copy. And if they have different literacy block schedules, then they could use that for their school. Or so maybe, well, you just have to forward it to teacher bestie so you have more of a likelihood to have the books in your hands. They're really good, actually. They really are.
I love that, Yvette. Share this with your colleagues so you up your chances.
There
Okay.
you go.
I'll just share this one to another look out for with decodables is decodables that are still encouraging guessing. So here is a free decodable, My Cat Sam. And then My Cat Sam has a fan. My Cat Sam has a bat. So yes, this is decodable, but we're not saying, you need to throw the baby out with the bathwater. You can still use this, but a great strategy or activity would to be to cover the picture so that the student isn't just using the pattern and then looking at the picture to guess, right? We want them to practice mapping those sounds to the letters and taking the time to sound it out. So you would cover the picture with a post-it note. They have to read the words. My cat Sam has a fan. And then to confirm that you've read it the right way, remove the post-it note and the student can check. So still a great resource. Just be mindful in how you are using it. Okay.
Okay. Now, let's take a look at our virtual bookshelf. There are so many good titles on here. And so in the chat, let us know if you've seen any of these books. But I do have a confession. Saturday morning, I woke up early before the whole family and I binged reading Above the Fray. It was so good. It was such a good, so it was such a good read. And it was, I like how she incorporated like the science of reading, but then also including elements of joy and cultural responsiveness. And then explicit instruction, Chantel at Reading Horizons, she told me about that book. And then I would say my third place is a tie between Marion Wolf's or speech to print. That's kind of tricky. What are some of y'all's favorites out of this book list of books that are aligned to the science of reading?
That's impossible to answer. That's like asking your favorite kid, or
I
I
felt
will
like
say probably the book I read the most, or the earliest that informed my career early on was that one that you don't see it very often, but it's Teaching Our Children to Read by Bill Honig, who is also associated with the core company, I guess, entity. But that really shaped my first grade teaching a lot, and everything else there I can't choose.
Okay,
Jillian?
Jillian, your turn.
Okay. One is David Kilpatrick Essentials. I just love how easy it is to, if I have a wondering, I just go in the back, look at, look in the glass, not the glossary, but the index, and then find it. And it's just such a good guide. So that one, but is it Prost and Squid?
Oh, Merriam-Wolf's book.
Yeah,
Proust and
Marion
the Squid,
Wolf's
yeah.
book.
Yeah.
That book blew my mind, and just learning about the history. At first, I was thinking it was a little too dense for me, but oh my goodness, I it I don't know. It was just the history of the brain blew my mind, and just it was like inspirational on more levels than I can explain here in this short ed web. So
Yeah. And
I
if we
love it.
think about it too, very rarely nowadays do I get time to sit down and read a book. But when I'm in the car, when I'm cooking, and I have my AirPods in, I love to listen to some podcasts. And if I have a short amount of time, then I can read some blogs. So here are some of our favorite blogs and podcasts. I biasedly love literacy talks. I will admit that. No, it's really good. Stacey, I'm giving you a shout out. It's really good because my attention
Shameless
span is
plug.
not long.
Shameless.
It no, it's really good, really good. And
We
then
love it.
the one that's like true crime for teachers. Have y'all been listening to Sold the Story? Oh, I see it in the chat. Karen and Shannon's just binge Sold the Story. So, and then also the Six Shifts and the Teaching, Reading, and Learning podcast, and then some of our favorite blogs. So we have the Reading Horizons blog, the Literacy Nest, and Reading Rockets. We mentioned that a couple of times. And then Tim Shanahan is actually a featured blogger on that site. So if we're forgetting any blogs or really good podcasts, please let me know, because the holiday break is coming up and we're driving to see family and I need something to listen to. So go ahead and drop those in the chat, or other blog ideas too. Oh yes.
Oh, Melissa and Lori.
Yes, Winmore, Melissa and Lori Love Literacy is a great one. Love it. So now, okay, now that we've gone through these resources, what to look for, what to look out for, now we're going to launch the poll again. So now, how comfortable are you with finding credible resources aligned to the science of reading? So before it was a little pre-assessment, but now how comfortable do you feel when you look at resources, say, hey, I know what to look for, or even if a resource isn't perfect, I know how to tweak it to make it align to the science of reading.
Look at that. In real time, we're seeing the data.
Cool. Cool. A lot less please send helps. So that's a good sign.
Yeah, that's
And
great.
yeah, and if you do need help, remember we talked about the importance of community and the community that's available on the collective as well. So we got this. And so before we head out and take a look at some of the questions, what is one resource that you've used that you would like to see included? So Jillian, what kind of resources are acceptable here? What do you think?
Anything goes. Free PD, different decodables, resources, anything. Ooh, the Rise
Okay.
workshop. Love that.
Yes. Oh, I'm seeing some conferences too. Conferences are great for
Yes.
connecting and finding your
Yeah,
crew.
for
Really good.
sure. Well, thank you guys so much. Just a reminder, next steps, you want to visit the Science of Reading Collective sign up page and share with a colleague. Leave a comment. That really is a collective. So we're all going to work together to add to these resources and continue that sense of community. Before we have a time for a couple of questions and answers, we'd just like to mention that Reading Horizons sponsored this webinar, and visit their website for other information about Reading Horizons, but also about the collective And again, shameless plug for the Literacy Talks podcast. I don't think I'll ever be comfortable doing that, but we love doing that. I mean, comfortable saying that. Okay, so time for a couple of question and answers. Let's see. Oh, Julie Manning asked the question, was Reading Horizons once known as intensive phonics? It was. It was referred to as Discover Intensive Phonics for Yourself. So yeah, great question. And then somebody else asked, how do you deal with the student's knowledge with high frequency words when using decodable readers? Jillian, do you want to answer that?
Yeah. So I would go back to, making sure that it aligns to your scope and sequence. So trying to pick books that don't have too many high frequency words that are irregular that your students haven't yet learned. And then if they are reading and they get to that word that they don't know, instead of giving them the word, write it down and go through the word and look at the parts that are decodable that they do know. And then in Reading Horizons, we circle the part that is irregular, or you could do the heart word where you're putting the heart under it. And that's the part they need to know by heart. So use it as a teaching opportunity.
Yeah, great. Somebody asked the question, which of these resources are most tangible, accessible for undergrads in their first or second year of college? I would say the core reading source book, teaching reading source book is what it's called. That's the one I use. And I bet a lot of people who have had exposure to that would agree. Another quick question, students who don't speak English as a first language, the Soundwall is going to be a very useful resource and tool for them. There's also a website that you can compare phonemes in each language. And we're not asking teachers to be a language expert in all cases, but to know which phonemes are similar and different in native languages compared to English if they're learning English as a second language. Lots of information shared today. Thank you so much, Yvette and Jillian, for curating all of this information for us, helping us to know about the collective. So thank you.
Yeah, and if we didn't get a chance to answer your question, look for a follow-up email and then relax this week. You've earned this break. Enjoy time being
Yeah.
thankful. We are thankful for you being here and all that y'all are doing for and with our students. So relax, unwind, have a beverage of your choice. I won't go into detail, but take some time, go through these resources and stay connected with us. We'll see you on the collective. And we just really appreciate you all so much.
Yes, thank
Yeah.
you so much for being here. Enjoy your break.
Yes. Thank you all for all you do.